Now today we say goodbye to media and society and discuss the state of our media and look into the future of the media industry here in South Africa. Welcome to Media and Society for the final time. I'm your host, Alicia Ntlantla-Jali. Now, this is a show where we've been taking a look at the intersection between the media as well as you, the society. And for the last time, you can still give us a call, 011-714-0661, alternatively 714-0662, or use X using the hashtag SABC Media and Society. Now, the media serves as a primary source of information, disseminating news, facts, and analysis to the public. And through various platforms such as newspapers, television, radio, as well as digital media, it keeps individuals informed about current events, social issues, and developments at both local, national, and global levels. Now, this role of the media is quite crucial for fostering public awareness, facilitating well-informed decision-making, as well as promoting civil engagement. Now, today we are marking a very significant moment as we say goodbye to a platform that bridged the gap between media and society. And throughout our time together, we've tackled tough topics, sparking important conversations and reflection. And every Sunday, our goal has been very clear: to hold up a mirror of accountability, empathy, as well as insight for both our viewers and fellow media professionals. We are grateful for the dedication of our panelists who have joined us eagerly each Sunday. And as we bid farewell, we carry with us the lessons learned and connections made, still committed, though, to continuing meaningful dialogue and progress in society.
Journalists are human beings. And I remember having a conversation with a colleague as well about this, that we live in a society, and that society also informs our perspective and how we view ourselves within that society as well. The reason, for instance, that we speak about transformation in the newsroom is specifically because we realize that there are voices that are absent in the newsroom that should actually be there. But these voices, when you think about science, that I was saying to somebody even yesterday, that you think about mathematics, for instance, there's a formula to mathematics, but there's no formula to being a human being. And you being a human being and telling the stories of human beings says that some of those opinions or some of the perspectives that you have will be influenced by where you live and where you grew up as well. Your childhood, for instance, would also influence the way that you report and how you perceive the world. There is a line to be drawn, but I argue and I say that journalists have opinions as well, and those opinions must be shared. But when you open yourself to sharing that opinion, you must know that you also open yourself to critique.
Identifying that, especially in post-apartheid South Africa, where the role of journalists has been, and research has shown, it's been a very liberal ethos role, being a watchdog, sensationalism. However, it also comes with a responsibility, and journalists have to be the voice of the people.
You must look at the skills that the other people are bringing, but also consider the kind of experience. But as an organization, at the same time, you need to say, how are we preparing even the people that we have here?
Yes.
How are we changing what they are doing? How are we equipping them, even if they came in as print journalists? How are we equipping them to be able to do the things that the business requires in the future?
How many of our media organizations have developed policies on dealing with the issue? We know the issue is evolving, it's complicated. Pronouns is just one illustration of what one has to deal with. But I wonder if there's any South African media organization that's developing or has developed policies on these issues.
Around hate crimes, around these issues, around training, sensitization? Are there any forums that are there? What does this transformation look like for an organization like this and all other media groups, in fact?
We've reached a point where we dehumanize people who hold different opinions. And in that Eldman's report, in terms of the trust in the media, you are now seeing society trusting business more than the media. In fact, globally, it's business and then NGOs and then government and then the media. But in South Africa, it's actually the media before government. So you need to look at that in that global perspective and see the trends that are going. Currently, you're looking at people, they are necessarily now trusting social media more than they are trusting, the general media. But in Eastern Europe, they're starting to lose even confidence in the media. So I think what we need to do is we need to go in society and find out what are the ills of society. What is somebody who's in Zanin or someone in Tunu? What are their problems? Or Umhlaba Uyalingana? What are their problems? We need to talk about the grassroots community issues, in order for us to regain confidence of the public in the media.
The key thing is, if you look at our media, as we've done for the last 30 years, you see that actually the agenda isn't set by the news media themselves. Overwhelmingly, it's set by those that have power, particularly political power. So our news agenda currently is set, and it's about the shutdown tomorrow. It's not about the people that are living in impoverished areas. It's not about the water crisis in Buffalo City. It's not about any number of things that it could and possibly should be about, But the key thing is for what we have to do is for media to be more clear about what agenda they're pursuing and on the basis and the principles on which they're pursuing it. It's why you need diverse media. It's why you need a public broadcaster that has got a very different setup, funding model and mandate to an entity that is a private entity, to a community station, to a community newspaper, or to one of the other bigger commercial media groups.
Well, joining us today are just some of our loyal panelists who never declined an invitation to discuss where needed. With us on Teams, let's welcome Mr. William Bird from Media Monitoring Africa, political analyst Dr. Levi Ndo, Sunday Times columnist Mr. Sam Mkokeli, Dr. MK Zwagala, who is a political analyst from CPUT, as well as Mr. Hopewell Khadebe, who is the SANEF projects as well as office manager. Gentlemen, for the final time, thank you so much for having never declined, of course, an invitation to come and join us. Welcome for the final time to each and every one of you, and thank you so much for joining us. So I just want to hear from each and every one of you. William, what has been your experience in the show Media and Society, and what should the public take away as we close the curtain on the show today? William, please unmute. You are still muted, William. I can't hear. All right, technology is playing with us this morning. William, I'm going to get back to you because I still cannot hear you. But I suppose let me, pass the question to each and every one of our panelists today, our loyal panelists, I might add. Dr. Zwagala, let's hear from you, sir. I mean, you've been an avid part, an integral part of the show, never declining an invitation to come and join us whenever we needed you. We really appreciated you. How should society then bid farewell to this show today? And how has been your experience in being part of this show?
Morning, colleagues. Morning to our viewers. Really, colleagues, it's a bittersweet moment. I think one would really hope that there's something that the SABC is planning, because I mean, the essence of this particular show was to really bridge the gap between your prime media and representing societal views. And so I'm saying again, one would hope that something better is coming. It's been representative. We've discussed broad issues. We've discussed social issues. We've discussed where we think the society, the country is thriving. And really we have, I suppose I'm part of the show now, the show has really advanced critical facets of democracy. Everyone has been given a voice, everyone has been given a stage, really. Again, colleagues, I sincerely hope that the SABC has something planned to ventilate what society at large thinks on such platforms. So it's really been a pleasure, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'm going to ask you the same thing, Dr. Ndoh. Did we achieve our prerogative of bridging the gap between media and society? And how was your experience with us, sir?
Good morning, Alicia. Good morning to my fellow panelists and the viewers out there. My experience has been that this is one show in which there has been very open discussions, especially the link between media practitioners and ordinary citizens out there. What I've also experienced is that most viewers would love to watch the show because they would be learning a lot from the show, especially on issues that they'll require clarity, and at times they'll also have to come in and share their own perspectives. Another view that I have about the show is that it would actually highlight most critical issues that are happening in society in the past week and in the week that is coming, and it will build that anxiety amongst ordinary members of society to say, this is what they should expect in the coming week. And it was, for me, one of the most important shows that the SABC ever had.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. William. Let's see if we can hear you this time around. I mean, we're talking about, of course, having tried, to bridge that gap between media and society, as well as your experiences as being part of our loyal panelists on the show, sir. William, all right. Yes, go ahead, William.
You can hear me.
Yes, now we can hear you, eventually.
Jolly good. Yeah, I mean, it's thank you very much for always inviting me. It's been a real privilege. Yes, I think there are a couple of things. The first is what it has and continues to highlight is the critical importance of public broadcast by public broadcaster in society. You need to be able to reflect and highlight the big issues that have perplexed media. And that's an important thing because people need to understand how media operates. And when you're in the business, it's very hard to give people a deeper insight into how that works. So every week what this has done is it's afforded people the opportunity who are usually outside of the newsrooms to get a sense of what the issues are, what the debates are that are occurring within newsrooms, and why people would choose to cover issues and things in the kinds of ways that they have. So on that alone, it's been a really critical and important program, and I hope that there's something that'll take its place that'll continue to do that, because I think what's clear about our future is that we need more explanation around how things work, explaining how decisions are taken as a particular form of accountability. It used to be that editors could just take decisions and then you could try and argue with them through letters to the media. But what we're seeing increasingly is that to gain elements of trust, as highlighted in one of the earlier segments, we really need to make sure that people understand how decisions are reached and why they're reached in the way that they are. So this has been a critical program in facilitating that discussion.
Thank you so much for always having taken part there, William. Hopewell, what has been your experience, and talk to us about the importance, of bridging that gap between media and society.
Good morning, sis, and good morning to my fellow panelists. I think for me, the show was always acting like a barometer where society got a chance to air their views about how the media is treating events and situations explosive or not about society, and they were able to express their views as to whether or not they felt the media has been fair, just and accurate in terms of reflecting what is happening within the community, particularly the issues of politics, but also issues that affects community in terms of whether there is a provision of services, from water to electricity, to how society feels about the way their elected officials are providing services in general. So for me, indeed, I've always appreciated using this platform or watching and then listening to the platform as a way of which we get to hear the views of society about the way in which we in the media industry are doing our job in terms of reflecting society's activities. So it has always been a pleasure to post that.
Thank you so much, Hopewell. I'm going to extend the same question to you as well, Sam.
Good morning, to the viewers, to yourself, and fellow panelists. Look, I will take a contrarian approach on this. Now, here we are, we're discussing media and society from the perspective of the show, which I think is unfair and is to the viewer, to society itself. I mean, the media has to delineate what is important to itself and what is important to society. It should not hog the headline for itself.
All right. Yes, Sam?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can still hear you. Go ahead, Sam.
So we need to avoid spending airtime on the media itself without it being earned. The media has to earn the right to be on the media. It should not appropriate to itself platforms to discuss itself. Also, the discussion about society, and society need a voice in the media when we discuss media and society. Right now, with society, is a very conversation about media and society. Some of the pressing issues in society need a sharp presentation and focus itself. South Africa has an economic crisis. We've got various other concerns, crime and corruption, failing states. So when we're discussing the issues that are about society, we need a sharper lens around those issues. So great attempts by the show, good for it to exist, but it's easy for such shows to be canned if they are not sharp around the issues that they ought to deal with. It's easy for the numbers, audience numbers, to drop when the pen is not sharpened around these issues. Thank you for the opportunity. Sorry to take a contrary view to this.
No, we really appreciate that, Sam, and thank you so much for always having been part of the discussions. Let's go to the lines. We do have another one who has been a prominent member of our panelists on the line. Kondile, very good morning to you. What do you have to say to us this morning?
It's a bad day for some of us who have been the furniture now in the program. Because for me, the program is playing a major role. You know, it's good to separate some of the issues, like media and society, as other previous callers are saying, or your panel are saying, that a specialized program, especially on media, is very critical. And I do not understand as to why should it be canned now as we approach the elections. Because this is the time when we need to critique the media. We need to look at the activities of the media as members of society, because media has got a way of obviously influencing perceptions, being biased. So this is the right time for the program to really thrive. So the network that is being canned, I don't think that was a strategic move. I don't know as to whether you guys have got a way of replacing it. But if you look at the content of media and society, in fact, it was beginning to teach, inform, and educate some of us who are media illiterate, because if you do that, you make it easy even for the work of you guys as broadcasters, journalists. You can't have a society that is media illiterate. Otherwise, it will always be that perception of biasness and so forth. So it closed that gap. But if you really can it, I don't think we are seeing any move in making sure that people like us are being educated of the media, because you can only make, especially with media, you can only make good decisions if you have an idea as to what is expressed. Sometimes, just as an example, you do a story about, local government, this is happening, but the slant that you are taking, that is where the problem used to be. The slant that you are taking, you are being seen as biased. But if you have an idea as to what should be the work of a journalist when covering that type of a story, you didn't have a problem. So for me, really, it's a disservice. I think SABC will look at it. They will have a way of replacing the program with a better program that is actually assisting famous media and society.
Kondile, thank you so much for that comment. Very encouraging views there from our loyal panelists. Remember, we are bidding farewell to the show today. So I want to go back to my panelists there. So let's discuss this. I mean, Kondile talks about the importance of media literacy, particularly at such a time. So, Doctor, I want to hear from you. Dr. Zwakala, let's talk about then how should people perceive the role of media in South African society today, particularly in promoting democracy, fostering social cohesion, as well as holding power to account?
Look, I think first and foremost, primary to media and media houses, it's to really advance and protect unashamedly the right of speech, freedom of speech. People should be heard, everyone should be heard. But I think within there lies opportunities, I'm saying again, to really educate people about the responsibility of that particular right. But I think as far as social cohesion is concerned, the freedom of speech as well, it does give an opportunity for people to erode social cohesion, fostering social cohesion, because the fact that anyone and everyone should and can be heard, it does not necessarily mean that everyone seeks to advance social cohesion. There are really certain concerning corners of society where people really are given a stage and a platform to make utterances that are really divisive in society. I suppose that is then the disadvantage of freedom of speech. We've got certain sections of society. We've got people that prefer living separately. We've got people that prefer saying particular things that are untoward. I suppose the democracy allows that. I suppose I'm saying again that is what that's a disadvantage of freedom of speech, because it really can erode the gains of democracy. It can erode the gains of freedom of speech.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, Doctor. All right, let's leave it there while we sort out those connectivity issues. We're going to take a very quick ad break and we'll be back with media and society. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, a fundamental role of the media is to act as a watchdog, holding individuals, institutions, as well as governments accountable for their actions as well as decisions. Investigative journalism plays a crucial role in uncovering corruption, exposing injustices, as well as scrutinizing the exercise of power. And by serving as a check on authority and promoting transparency, media institutions contribute to the maintenance of democratic governance, the protection of human rights, as well as the promotion of social justice within society. We're still joined by Mr. William Bird from Media Monitoring Africa, political analyst Dr. Levi Ndo, Dr. MK Zwagala, who is a political analyst from CPUT, as well as Mr. Hopewell Akhadebe, who is the SANEF Projects and Office Manager. We've just bid farewell to Mr. Sam Mkokeli there. So I just want to understand, gentlemen, maybe William, let's come to you. How effectively then does the South African media serve as a watchdog, holding those individuals, institutions, as well as governments to account, sir?
Well, I think it's in a number of ways, actually. I think one of the reasons you want a diverse and need a diverse media is that you need different media to be holding different power players, power holders, duty bearers responsible depending on what the issue is. So in some instances that may well be government departments. In other instances it may well be big giant technology companies or big companies that are doing wrong and either polluting, for example, that you need to hold them to account. So that's why you need diverse media. Unless you've got news organizations all over the place, essentially, and this is one of the reasons why the tragic loss of the number of journalists that we're seeing on an ongoing basis is bad for democracy, is because it means you've got less people and less qualified journalists going around being able to report and tell people what's going on and being able to hold people wherever they are accountable. So small community media, commercial media are as important as the big public broadcaster. It's just obviously those kinds of power dynamics will change. But what is clear is that unless you've got a sustainable public broadcaster, your ability to hold all of those power bearers to account is going to be diminished. And you see this when you look at examples of democracies function globally, that where there's high levels of trust in your institutions, where you have functioning public broadcasters, you also then tend to have higher levels of accountability systems being tested and pushed by different media. And we're very lucky in South Africa to have specialized entities that focus just on exposing wrongdoing. You know, they spend a lot of time and energy and resources going in, exposing things. The Gupta leaks, I think, is one of the most obvious examples of how, news organizations could work together to hold some of the biggest power players in our country to account. And that's something that has changed the trajectory of our democracy.
Hopewell, what do you say to that? And also maybe just what do you think about to what extent then do media institutions here in South Africa act as a check on those authorities as well as promote transparency in government? Please unmute, Hopewell.
Apologies, Advocate.
Yes, go
I'm
ahead.
saying I'm very confident, and maybe I'm just a perpetual optimist when it comes to the South African media. We are very fortunate in that our media is yet to start taking sides on issues of political parties. In other countries, the media is known to state openly which political party they tend and then political ideology they tend to follow or support. But in South Africa, we still have the media that is still striving to be always fair and balanced and to cover all political activities and actions of any establishment in a balanced manner. If you were to go to the DRC, you still find that even politicians own newspapers or own television stations, and therefore when they report it, you then know from the word go that they are unlikely to be critical of certain actions of certain political organizations. So we are lucky in South Africa. So when we balance and get reports, you just know that there's a likelihood in the majority to be critical of all activities that are taking place in the country. Our government is not spared or mollycoddled, so to speak, saved from scrutiny of the media in this country. And this show, which has been a great thing for us, I hope the SABC and the public writes to the SABC and ask for a similar show to be repeated and to be brought back. This show has been one of those where even the media was being challenged by the public, was being looked at and scrutinized by the public, so that we know that in this country, not even the media is seen as a sacrosanct institution. It's false. It gets to be measured. It's false. Gets to be challenged by the public. I would never forget when they were looking at how we reported the coronavirus, for example, the spread and all that happened. Even us as the media, the public was able to say, you guys need to be doing A, B, and C in terms of how you are reporting the coverage. Do not take it, they don't take it for granted that the media will be fair all the time, but they looked at how we were reflecting society's activities, society's anxieties about the virus. So yeah, I'm very happy with the way things are in South Africa. We know that we have the society that speaks out, that is very high on activism, and does scrutinize the media, does challenge the media if they feel that it is not doing what it's supposed to do.
Very important point there, Hopewell. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Levi, maybe just also, have some input there. I mean, how important is it to hold the media itself to account?
I think it is quite important for, firstly, to appreciate the different institutions of higher learning that are training journalists in the country. That journalists are people that we expect them to stick to the basics and follow the code of practice. And that is what we actually see in most journalists in the country. And my view is that each time a journalist has to start exercising his or her responsibilities, the first thing that comes to mind is that I am now doing a professional job. I'm outside my body. My focus is to ensure that I report very fairly, openly, and ensure that I do not take sides. But what is central is to ensure that information is correctly disseminated to the consumers. What we need to consider as well is that, as the show is self-explanatory, media and society, whatever you do or say, you also get scrutinized by ordinary people on the ground. And that is why, in some instances, you'd hear other members of the public saying, this journalist or this analyst appears to be veering towards a particular direction. And that is exactly what society has to do. But my point really is that it's important to go back to the basics, focus on the job that is at hand, and ensure that the public get all the necessary information that is required. What I also appreciate mostly is that most South Africans are the consumers of news, and they rely on the media for their day-to-day activities. And that is why the first thing that a regular or an ordinary South African will start doing is to check what the media is saying before getting out of your house. And that talks to the reliability on the media and how people feel that the information that they get from the media, it's reliable. And my view is that that is the path that the media in South Africa is taking. And I think we actually outsmart many other countries in that regard.
William, I really want you to maybe also have, a chance to answer that. We've seen quite a lot of stories in the recent times where journalists or certain people in the media have written stories that were non-factual, and the public, was taken aback as to how can this be on such a public platform, and yet it seems like nobody went and actually did the fact-checking. So maybe answer to that. And also, in what ways then can the South African media further enhance its capacity to uncover corruption, expose injustices, as well as scrutinize the exercise of power?
Thanks. My other colleagues have spoken about some of the elements. It's very easy to say journalists should do things in the same way and make sure that they get things right. Sometimes they do get things wrong and they make big mistakes. Sometimes media are their own worst enemies, quite frankly, where they forget or they are serious lapses in ethical reporting. We've seen this with the reporting on children, for example, over the last 30 years. But we've also seen how media over the last 30 years have improved the way that they report on children as a particular example. I think that in the context, though, of declining trust, when you look at news organizations and journalism, the most critical thing that they have, their most valuable asset, is their credibility. We saw, for example, at SABC, how its audiences declined dramatically when its news and credibility was being brought into disrepute by Hlaudi Motsoeneng. We saw how there were serious efforts to interfere and undermine editorial independence and integrity, and because of that, there was a significant decline. When you started to see then efforts to again be credible, be independent, to not report on news in a way that just favored one person or entity, you suddenly started to see those audiences returning. So these things often speak to each other. And then in that context, then when you think of how we're seeing the rise of online harms, particularly mis and disinformation, for news organizations, again, to maintain their credibility, they really have to make sure that they take the time to make sure that what they're putting out is balanced, fair, and accurate, because it takes just one news organization to mess things up, and it undermines trust and believability and credibility in all of the news organizations. And we've seen this with the Independent, for example, over the last decade. We've seen how news organization, how them as a news organization, the 10 Babies story, I think, is an obvious one. That didn't just undermine the credibility of that particular news organization, it undermined the credibility of all news organizations. And when you are in a period where people are looking to see where they can get balanced, fair, and accurate information from, it's really important that media do make sure that they get those things right. When they mess up, and they will, because that's what it is to be human, they need to own up to that. They need to explain how they messed up, why they messed up, and then, apologize for it if necessary, and then move on from that. And that's what we've seen that they have done, for example. But you also saw how media played that critical role. I'm so pleased Hopewell reminded us of the media's role in reporting COVID. They were critical players in ensuring that we dealt with that pandemic in a way that was better, much better than many other countries around the world, precisely because we had a media who were there to be able to be critical, but also help get credible, accurate, reliable information out.
Dr. Zwagala?
Yeah. Look, in all fairness, SA media has transformed in recent years. And I think really efforts have been made to hold the government institutions to account. However, the media seems to be frightened by the private sector. No one holds the private sector accountable. They hold themselves accountable to themselves. And it is really in these environments, colleagues, where, things like your discriminations, your sexism, your racism are really harbored and perpetuated. So I think we've obviously get various platforms, but I really think that the media is largely frightened of the private sector, and I think that needs to be explored. I'm saying that needs to be explored because this scrutiny that colleagues have alluded to, that scrutiny really emanates from society. Society felt that certain media houses were taking certain political positions, certain political biases. However, there's a very critical corner of our society that needs to be looked at, and that is primarily the private sector. A lot goes on in the private sector, colleagues, that is not reported on. A lot needs to be fixed, and I think as a society, we rely on media to expose whatever is going on in that particular sector.
Hopewell, do you want to add to that, to the doctor's point?
Yeah, thank you, Sisi. I do concur that maybe there is a perception, and it has to be dealt with, whether it's correct or wrong, that the media in South Africa tend to be kind to the business sector. It doesn't challenge them sufficiently. But I do beg to differ that we have had several stories that were critical of the business. The issue of Steinhoff, for example, where the media looked at the investors and looked how much they had lost, and looked at the corruption in terms of accountability and accounting in terms of this, what you call it, the Johannesburg Securities Exchange rules and regulations that were flaunted by that organization. Yes, it is not sufficient. Still, a lot of investors do go under when an organization is allowed to break the rules, and there tend to be an inherent trust on businesses that the CEOs are going to do the right thing. You go and check, for example, Tonga Hewlett, that eventually forced the CEO to resign. People had tended to allow this to go on for too long, and by the time the chances of it responding, or what you call of the organization responding and acting positively in the interest of investors, we find that it was maybe too late, or a lot of money had been lost. So they tend to be slow in checking and cross-checking the rules of how business gets to be done out there, and how eventually resources and jobs are lost. I'm one of those people who think that often the MBAs that are coming out of people who are getting to business, they tend to be very slow in terms of checking and cross-checking how they do things. Eventually, it's jobs that get lost. It's people who get to be thrown out unceremoniously, and the mining sector as an individual, as an organization, by the time it starts shedding jobs and throwing people out, it is often too late to save the situation or save the day, because the CEOs would have argued in a lot of terms to say, we are looking at the core business, and therefore we are throwing out those that, meaning in terms of job losses, we are throwing out those that are not essential jobs. But jobs are jobs, and people's lives get ruined by such. So yeah, I kind of agree yet disagree that it's not like we're not doing much. A lot is being done. Just that I'm one of those who feel that the media may be focused on government and departments and others, and they don't tend to be too critical and scrutinizing the business sector sufficiently. But I do know that there's been lots of good examples of stories where we looked at how business could have done better.
All right, we're going to take a final ad break, and then we'll be back with a wrap of Media and Society. As we bid farewell to Media and Society, we take a look at the state of our media and what the future actually looks like for the media in South Africa. We're still very pleased to be joined by our loyal panelists, Mr. William Bird from Media Monitoring Africa, political analyst Dr. Levi Ndou, Dr. MK Zwagala, who's a political analyst from CPUT, as well as Mr. Hopewell Hadebe, who is the SANEF Projects as well as office manager. So, gentlemen, this is our final segment. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Ndou. In your closing remarks, what would you like to say?
Well, what I would like to say is that it appears to be quite easy to investigate activities that are happening in government because government has opted for transparency, openness, and accountability, which does not appear to be the case with the private sector. So it is quite easy to go to any government official or a politician to get information because they know that they are not supposed to hide any information from journalists. And that becomes a difficult sector. And that is why most of our news will feature government activities or government corruption and government projects because it is quite easy to get that. But my parting shot will be that it is important for journalists to always remember their roles, their ethical conduct, and ensure that whatever they do is done by the book and they've got the audience that they're supposed to serve, who should actually get the information as it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. William. Very quickly there. So what measures then can be taken to strengthen the independence as well as the integrity of South African media?
I'm going to go for the critical importance of the public broadcaster. We see it being actively defunded by the state at the moment, which is just terrific. We see government being only too happy to provide bailout after bailout after bailout to SAA. They haven't not done the same thing for the SABC. They've given loan guarantees over the last decade and a half and not provided bailouts when actually this is an entity that speaks to the majority of South Africans. It's the entity that has the mandate to tell our stories, that has the mandate to represent and tell issues of the most marginalized. They speak to the most marginalized in South Africa. We know that a third of South Africans rely exclusively on the SABC analog TV to get their news and information. So if we're serious about fighting for our democracy, if we're serious about realizing our constitutional values of dignity and equality, we need a strong, independent, functioning public broadcaster, because without that, I think that our hopes of realizing the promise of our constitution are going to be almost impossible to meet and to reach. And if you have a sustainable public broadcast, it means that you can then ensure that you have the resources and the means to continue doing programs just like this one. And I suspect that that may be behind what's driving the fact that this is no longer are going to be on our schedules, which is obviously very sad for us and for the people involved. And I want to thank them for all their hard work over the years for this. It hasn't gone unnoticed, and it is deeply appreciated by certainly myself and the organization I represent, Media Monitoring Africa. So thank you very much.
Oh, William, thank you so much. A very quick one, Dr. Zwagala.
Yeah, colleagues, really, I fully concur with my colleague there. The financial stability of the public broadcaster is paramount. Look, threats or actual retrenchments, political appointments in senior management and boards is an issue of concern. This does suggest that the broadcaster may be perceived to be aligning with certain individuals in government. I think that should be looked into. And the issue of reach, colleagues, we really need a representation of diverse views in our society. So I think the public broadcasters and media at large should look at the issue of reach. We should be reaching all corners of society to represent the issue of rural communities that are not represented is actually worrying. And lastly, colleagues, I think there are programs such as this one, Media and Society, that should really be protected, that should really be preserved. Programs such as the Cutting Edge, other programs, other platforms, your Carte Blanches, your Checkpoints, your Crime Watches, those are critical platforms that really represent, that give us a preview of what goes on in society, what goes on in our communities. And really, again, colleagues, for the last time, we would really hope that the SABC does bring something of this similar standard, or something even better, so that societal views can be represented. Thank you.
Doctor, I'm going to end on that note. Gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for always being loyal to the show Media and Society. And thank you at home for watching our show Media and Society. We hope that, of course, you will keep it locked to SABC News as our panelists have called for it. Let's hope that the relevant authorities are listening, as, of course, our panelists are begging for a similar platform for the media as well as society to interconnect. I'm Alicia Ndlandla Jali. It's been great. Have yourself a great Sunday further. Goodbye.